to the potter's house, and there I will cause thee to hear my words. Then I went down to the potter's house, and behold, he wrought a work on the wheels. And the vessel that he made of clay was marred in the hand of the potter. So he made it again another vessel, as seemed good to the potter to make it. Then the word of the Lord came to me, saying, O house of Israel, cannot I do with you as this potter? Saith the Lord, behold, as the clay is in the potter's hand, so are ye in mine, O house of Israel. I'm going to preach for the next few minutes the breaking process. The breaking process. If you'll put your Bibles down, Pastor, will you pray over the remainder of the service? You may be seated this evening. Have you ever, at some point, and probably everybody, ever broke something? You're doing something, working on something, and you break it. It happens. Most people will wind up breaking something in their lifetime, probably multiple things. I remember growing up, and even to today now, when me and my brother would be roughhousing around the house, and my mom would be like, careful or you will break something. Then it would really turn into, you break it and I'm going to break you. So you just learned, don't mess around mom's stuff, especially her nice stuff. You just don't want to break that stuff. Usually you should go outside. We obviously haven't learned anything. We still roughhouse around the house. So, but you hear the sayings, you break it, you bought it. You hear those kind of sayings all over, and it's very interesting to me. Pottery, if you look into it, it's made by a form of clay body into objects, and it's of a required shape, and the heating of them to high temperatures in an oven which removes all the water from the clay, which induces reactions that lead to a permanent change, including increasing their strength, then hardening their setting, their shape. A clay body can be decorated before or after firing. However, prior to the same shaping process, the clay must be prepared. Its kneading helps to ensure an even moisture content through the body. Air trapped within the clay body needs to be removed. This is called de-airing. It can be accomplished either by a machine called a vacuum plug or manually by wedging. Wedging can also help produce an even moisture content. And once a clay body has been kneaded and de-aired or wedged, it is shaped by a variety of techniques. And after shaping, it is dried and then put back into the fire. It's very interesting to me how pottery works. I was going to try to figure out how to do some pottery while I was preaching up here, but I would not want to try that. My illustration would go completely wrong. But it's very interesting, pottery. It's cool. I remember in school we would make pottery, make a pot. They always looked terrible, but we would attempt at making pottery. And the pottery, the process, it takes time for the potter to get it right. It takes time. It's something that is a process. We may have to restart sometimes because the clay just won't let him do what he needs to do. It's a process. It's something that's going to take a little bit. The word broken, I looked up, and it is violently separated into parts. It's shattered, damaged, fractured, violated. It's disrupted or made weak or infirm. It's subdued. It's crushed. It's bankrupt, reduced in rank or cut off, disconnected, not complete or full. David realized two very powerful truths. First, that his heart was broken. Not merely that it was sad, but that something was fundamentally wrong with it. And second, that God is attracted to brokenness. He knew that if it's not broke, God won't fix it. And that's why David didn't mind admitting he had a problem. Psalms 31:12 says, I am forgotten as a dead man out of my mind. I am like a broken vessel. In fact, the whole purpose of the Old Testament law was to show man that he was fundamentally broken and that he needed God's help. Romans 7:7 says, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law. For I had not known lust, except the law had said, thou shalt not covet. Galatians 3:24 says, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto Christ, that we might be justified by faith. The law of Moses contains many illustrations concerning brokenness. And any earthen vessel contaminated by an unclean object or animal or person was to be broken. When leprosy had broken through the skin, a person was unclean and had to be separated from everyone else. No sacrifice that was imperfect was allowed to even be offered to God, and no man who was broken or even blemished was permitted to enter the presence of God as a priest, furthering the illustration that fact that our brokenness separated us from God. Leviticus 21:17-19 says, speak unto Aaron, saying, whosoever he be of thy seed in their generations that hath any blemish, let him not approach to offer the bread of his God. For whatsoever man he be that hath blemish, he shall not approach. A blind man or a lame, or he that hath a flat nose, or anything superfluous. I think I got it close. Or a man that is broken-footed or broken-handed. No man that hath a blemish of seed of Aaron the priest shall come nigh to offerings of the Lord made by fire. And he hath a blemish, he shall not come nigh to offer the bread of his God. The Old Testament is really an ongoing contest between God and the devil's false gods for the affections of Israel. Altars to Jehovah and many false deities and alternately built and broken depending on the character of the man who occupied Israel's throne. The implication throughout all these illustrations is clear. Humanity is broken by sin, and until sin's power is broken in our lives, we live under a certain threat of eternal destruction. Either you break sin or sin will break you. People can become broken by many things. Sometimes it's other people that break us. Sometimes it's circumstances that break us. And sometimes even God himself will break us. But most of the time, we break ourselves. Our stubborn instance of doing things our own way is our own worst enemy. The good news is that no matter how you got broken, God is willing to fix you if you'll just say, God, I'm broken. I need you to reach down in my life and fix the issue. When leprosy had broken out in the walls of the house was to be broken down. But Psalms 147:3, I love this verse. He says, he healeth the broken in the heart, and he bindeth up their wounds. Luke 4:18 says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and recovering of the sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. The only thing God asks is that we break our pride and admit that we need his help. And he steps in and he breaks the power of sin. What a trade. If you'll break your pride, he'll break the sin. But we have to take the first step into that trade. Hosea 10:12 says, sow to yourselves in righteousness, reap in mercy, break up your fallow ground, for it is time to seek the Lord till he come and rain righteousness upon us. Matthew 21:44, and whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be broken, but on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. 1 Peter 5:5-7 says, God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. Contrary to popular belief, pride is not thinking too much of oneself, but simply thinking too much about oneself. Good or bad, that's what pride is. Pride makes me the sinner instead of God. These are two reactions that keep us from breaking our pride. And Scripture, we have Scripture for each of them. There's a person in the Bible, and it's kind of like the I'm not broken person, the up and out person. In Revelations 3:16 says, so then because thou art lukewarm, neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Because thou sayest, I am rich and increased with goods and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched and miserable, poor, blind, and naked. Then there's the I'm too broken person, kind of the down and out person. And Jeremiah 33:20 says, thus saith the Lord, if ye can break my covenant of the day and my covenant of the night, that there should not be day and night in their season, then may also my covenant be broken. Jesus met with two of these proud people in the city of Jericho. The up and outer, it's a very familiar character in the Bible. He's preached about a lot in different situations, but it was the short tax collector named Zacchaeus. He had to humble himself and climb up a tree in order to see Jesus. We fall short and need to humble ourselves just to get to the tree. In spite of his outward success, Zacchaeus finally realized that he was inwardly broken. God planted the sycamore tree, but Zacchaeus had to climb it. You missed it. God planted the sycamore tree. He made the opportunity for him to know that, hey, I'm here for you to work a miracle in your life. He places opportunities in our lives. We have moments in our lives where we can decide, God, I'm ready, I'm willing now, and I'm going to climb the tree to make sure you fix me inwardly. There's the down and outer guy. He was the blind beggar named Bartimaeus who had to literally humble himself and cry out, even when he couldn't see for himself, that Jesus was truly there. And when his friends told him, please be quiet, he said, you're not the one who realizes how broken I am. Somebody told me God is here, and there is no way I'm going to let him get past me without him stopping and helping me. Only the blind man in the crowd of seeing people actually saw Jesus for who he really was. We don't come to an altar to add God to our life. We come to an altar to break down the altars of sin that have broken us. And we build up an altar to God. Every single one of us has an altar to something or someone in our life. But we need to replace every single altar that we have put up and put one back up for God. We need to stop worrying about what sister so-and-so and brother so-and-so think and be more worried about what he thinks and stop worrying about, oh, my pride, I can't help it. I wish we would get past the point where we can say, God, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I just know I need you. I just know I need to know what you think. Because in the end, it doesn't matter what they think. I just want to hear, well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into your reward. I don't care what they think, but I definitely care what he thinks. And too many times we let pride stop us from our miracle. We let too many times what people would think stop us from what God really would want to do in our life. I've gone too far. Sometimes we say, God, why would you ever use me again? And we let what happens in our past get a hold of us, and we say, it can't ever happen. God would never use me that way. Let me remind some people, he uses the flawed and broken. Abraham was too old. Elijah was suicidal. Joseph was abused. Job went bankrupt. Moses had a speech problem. Gideon was afraid. Samson was a womanizer. Rahab was a prostitute. Samaritan woman was divorced. Noah was a drunk. Jeremiah was young. Jacob was a cheater. David was a murderer. Jonah ran from God. Peter denied Christ 3 times. Zacchaeus was small and money hungry. The disciples fell asleep while praying. You can't tell me he doesn't use the broken and the flawed. You can't tell me he doesn't see you where you're at and want to still use you to where God wants to take you. We've just got to break the pride and step out and say, God, I'm willing and I'm ready. I don't care what people say. I just want to be used. He's not worried about your past. He's just worried about your future. Here's a little side note. The 3 things that were in the Ark of the Covenant. It would help if I took my lid off. The manna. God gave them food when they started complaining about being hungry. Aaron's rod. When they rose up against the authority. The broken 10 Commandments when they built the golden idol and Moses came down and smashed it. It was signs of 3 of the biggest failures in Israel's history. And he put it in the ark. What covered the ark? The mercy seat. I said a mercy covered the 3 biggest failures that Israel ever faced. He said, you know what? Yeah, I'm putting it in the ark, but guess what? Mercy is going to cover every mistake. Mercy is going to cover everything that we've made a mistake in our life. It was covered by mercy. Too many times we let what happened in our past take control of what can happen in our future. We are so close to this end of this time, and God's coming back for a church. And this church is on, I believe we're in revival. I'm not saying we're on the brink. We're in revival. But there's some, if you would just stop letting what happened in the past come back to haunt you in the future, God would use you in such a way you've never thought he could use you. There is such potential that could happen in this church that you would never even could imagine what God said is going to happen. We already been prophesied the walls are going to be knocked down. These walls, I believe it. It's going to happen, but it's going to take someone saying, I'm tired of what people are going to say about me. I'm just worried about his approval. So I'm going in the will of God to make sure I am there when he says, are you ready? It's time to move forward and stop worrying about the past. There's too many times. Hear this young guy up here. I've grown up in this. So that's almost 25 years. As some people say, I'm an old man. 25 years. I've almost made it 25 years. So, but listen to me. You can take what you want, but listen to this young guy up here. I know what it is to sit on a church pew and think about, well, there's no way God could ever use me in that way. There's been a time in my life where I truly would have walked out the church doors and never would have come back if I had been 18 years old. So hear me. He can still use. I may not have done some of the stuff others had, but I did my share. I know what it is to come to church and you can't feel anything. I know what it's like to go to camps and conferences, and I know what it's like to come back and you see your friends on fire for God and everything's going great for them, and you sit on the pew and you say, why can't I feel what they're feeling? I know what that's like. I know what it's like, and too many times we stop and we let what people and what our past will say stop us from what could really happen. There was a couple who used to go to England to shop in beautiful stores. They both liked antiques and pottery and especially teacups. There was their 25th wedding anniversary, and one day in this beautiful shop, they saw a beautiful teacup, and they said, may we see that? We've never quite seen one so beautiful. As the lady handed it to them, suddenly the teacup spoke, and you don't understand, it said, I haven't always been a teacup. There was a time when I was red and I was clay, and my master took me and rolled me and patted me over and over, and I yelled out, let me alone, but he only smiled and said, not yet. Then I was placed on the spinning wheel, the teacup said, and suddenly I was spinning around and around and around, and I said, stop it, I'm getting dizzy. I'm screaming, but the master only nodded and said, not yet. Then he put me in the oven, and I never felt such heat. I wondered why he wanted to burn me, and I yelled, and I knocked at the door, and I could see him through the opening, and I could read his lips as he shook his head and said, not yet. Finally, the door opened, and he put me on the shelf, and I began to cool, and there, that's better, I said, and he brushed me and painted me all over, and the fumes were horrible, and I thought I would gag, and I said, stop it. He only nodded, not yet. Then suddenly he put me back in the oven, not like the first one. This was twice as hot, and I knew I would suffocate. I begged and I pleaded, I screamed, cried out all the time. I could see him through the opening, not yet. Then I knew there wasn't any hope. I would never make it. I was just ready to give up, but the door opened, and he took me out and placed me on the shelf. 1 hour later, he handed me a mirror, and I couldn't believe it was me. I'm beautiful. I want you to remember, he said, I know it hurts to be rolled, patted, but if I had let you alone, you would have dried up. I know it made you dizzy to spin around on the wheel, but if I had stopped, you would have crumbled. I knew it hurt and it was hot and disagreeable in the oven, but if I hadn't put you there, you would have cracked. I know the fumes were bad and when I brushed and painted you all over, but if I hadn't have done that, you would have never hardened. You would have not had any color in your life, and if I hadn't have put you back in the second oven, you wouldn't survive for a very long because the hardness would not have held. Now you are a finished product. You are what I had in mind when I first began with you. Before service, I was in the prayer room and praying over this service, and I know I'm talking to two groups of people tonight. The musicians can come. I'm about to wrap it up. One group is doing okay. Your life on the outside seems to have it all together. But inside, you're missing something. Whether that be joy, peace, trust that He has it under control, you're missing something. You come to church service after church service. You ask God, why can't I feel anything? You question Him saying, I've prayed, and it seems nothing changes. I still feel empty inside. You've been looking for an answer. The Lord wants you to know He's heard your prayers. He's heard them. He's heard the cries at night. He's heard the moments of weakness when you say, God, why can't I feel it? But He is waiting for you to truly surrender everything. He is a gentleman. He won't force you to surrender anything you don't want to. But some of you are so close to a breakthrough that if you would come to an altar, lay it all on the line, leave it at the altar, the pieces that you've been missing will be brought right back into your life. That joy you've been missing, right back in. That peace that you've been missing, right back in. And you can sit there and you can say, oh, I got it all together. I don't need to listen to that 24, almost 25-year-old guy up there. You can say that. And you have that right and that opinion to say that. But you need to hear what God's saying. And He's saying, I'm ready to put something back in. I'm ready to start working on that masterpiece again. Yeah, we're kind of like, God, well, we're here. We're just going to sit here. He wants to fix that piece. The second group that I believe the Lord is speaking to tonight are the ones that have done everything else. You've gone over the line time and time again. You're so broke down and wondering, can God still really use this broken pile? Can I ever get back in the good graces of a loving God? Psalms 147, He heals the broken in heart. It's time to stop running from the grace and the mercy of God. If you would stop, God would start to pick up the broken pieces and start putting them back together. Too many times we can come into church and we can sit here and we can, oh, that's good, preacher. That's great worship, man. That was a power-packed service. And we never once come to an altar. I thank God that I was raised to make my home at an altar. It's easy. It's so easy to say, well, that was good. I'm going home. It's easy to say, well, that was good, but that wasn't for me. Brother Dean said at camp, one of the most probably incredible messages I've ever heard. And it was so simple. He just said, I want to get right in the middle of it. Why live on the fringe? Why live at the edge of this? I just want to be right in the middle. What's the point of coming to church service after church service if we're not ever going to find a place at an altar? Even if maybe the message wasn't exactly for you, there's always something for you. There's always something. But too many times we just walk in and walk out and we never once get what God really had. He wants to finish some people tonight. It was so hard. I don't know why it was so hard to get a hold of this message. But as today was going on and I was praying, God, just tell me what you want me to say. Tell me what you want me to do tonight. God, just use me in any way you can possibly use me. And the Lord started dealing with me about some things in my own life that I had to make sure I broke down. Don't think just because I'm up here and I'm preaching and that I'm going for my license that I just live a perfect life. There's still pieces of me that He's working on. There's still parts of me that He's chipping away. They may not be huge, but if you let them sit there, they'll grow into more of a crack. And all of a sudden you crumble because you let one little piece stick. Would you stand tonight? I don't know. I know there's those two groups that I taught that the Lord wants to help tonight. And I wonder if you would make up in your mind that, you know what, I'm not leaving tonight until, God, you either fix what I have been missing or you just completely fix me. Don't let tonight pass you by. Don't wait for someone else to come to the altar before you come to the altar. He's waiting here for you. You have to step out. If you truly want God to fix the brokenness, you have to step. He's waiting with His arms open. He's saying, I know you're missing that joy. I know you're missing the peace. What hinders you? God wants to wrap His arms around you. Don't miss the opportunity. Don't miss it. Let Him finish the masterpiece.